300 bishops have gathered from across the Roman Empire for the most important religious council in Christian history. Emperor Constantine himself has summoned them. The fate of Christianity hangs in the balance. A theological dispute threatens to tear the young faith apart before it can truly begin. The debate has grown heated. A priest named Arius is speaking, arguing that Jesus Christ was a created being. Divine, yes, but not co-eternal with God the Father. Not truly God in the same way. The words are technical, philosophical, the kind of argument that would make most modern listeners' eyes glaze over. But to the men in this room, this is not an abstract debate. This is everything. If Arius is right, the entire foundation of Christian worship is wrong. If Christ is not fully God, then Christianity has been worshiping a creature rather than the Creator. The stakes could not be higher. And then it happens. A bishop rises from his seat. He is not a young man, perhaps in his 50s, weathered by years of persecution and imprisonment. His name is Nicholas, and he comes from the coastal city of Myra. He has heard enough. He strides across the council chamber, and in front of the Emperor of Rome, in front of the assembled leadership of the Christian Church, he strikes Arius across the face. The room erupts. This is simply not done. Violence at a church council? Striking a fellow cleric? Nicholas is immediately seized, stripped of his bishop's vestments, and thrown into a cell to await judgment. He has disgraced himself. His career is over. That night, according to legend, Nicholas has a vision. Christ and the Virgin Mary appear in his cell. They ask why he is imprisoned. "For loving you," Nicholas replies. They restore to him his vestments and his gospel book. When the guards check his cell the next morning, they find him fully robed, reading scripture, his chains inexplicably loosened. The council, shaken by this apparent miracle, reinstates him. This is the man who became Santa Claus, the jolly old elf in the red suit, the gift-giver who slides down chimneys, the embodiment of commercial Christmas, whose image sells billions of dollars of merchandise every year. That Santa Claus was, according to tradition, a man who punched a heretic in the face at a church council and was saved from disgrace only by divine intervention. Before we continue this story, I want to ask you something. If you believe these dark chapters of history deserve to be remembered, if you believe the truth about our saints and our celebrations should not be buried beneath comfortable myth, you can help us continue this work by liking this video and subscribing. Your support keeps the candle lit and allows us to keep exploring the shadows. Tonight, we descend into the 4th century, to a world where bishops performed miracles and suffered martyrdom, where the line between saint and sinner was drawn in blood and flame. We will meet the real Nicholas of Myra, a man born into wealth who gave it all away, a prisoner who survived persecution, a bishop who wielded both divine power and human violence. We will witness the legends that grew around him, children saved from a butcher's barrel, prostitutes rescued from their fate, storms calmed, and sailors saved. We will trace how a 4th century Turkish bishop became a Dutch gift-giver, then an American icon, then a global brand. We will meet his dark companions, the demons and monsters who traveled with him through the centuries, punishing the wicked while he rewarded the good. Krampus, Black Peter, Père Fouettard, the shadows that Christmas forgot. And we will ask the questions that the Christmas cards never raise. What does it mean that our symbol of generosity was also a symbol of violence? What have we lost in sanitizing our saints? And what lurks in the shadows of the holidays we think we know? This is not a story about Santa Claus. Santa Claus is a fiction, a commercial creation designed to sell products and warm hearts. This is a story about the man behind the myth and the darkness that myth was designed to hide. This is Saint Nicholas, and his story is stranger than you know. Welcome to the Midnight Archives. To understand Nicholas, we must first understand the world into which he was born. And that world was one of persecution, suffering, and blood. Nicholas was born around 270 AD in the city of Patara, in the Roman province of Lycia, what is now the southern coast of Turkey. This was a prosperous region, a crossroads of trade routes connecting east and west. Greek culture had flourished here for centuries. The city was wealthy, cosmopolitan, home to merchants, sailors, and scholars. It was also a dangerous time to be a Christian. The Roman Empire had been persecuting followers of the new faith on and off for over 2 centuries, but the persecutions of Nicholas's youth would be the worst in Christian history. Emperor Diocletian, who came to power in 284 AD, launched what became known as the Great Persecution, a systematic attempt to destroy Christianity entirely. Churches were demolished, sacred texts were burned. Christians were given a choice: sacrifice to the Roman gods or die. Those who refused faced execution by sword, by fire, by wild beasts in the arena. Others were sent to the mines, a death sentence in slow motion as they were worked until their bodies gave out. Women were sent to brothels. Men were mutilated. Families were torn apart. This was the world that shaped Nicholas. He was not born into some peaceful Christian utopia where faith was easy and comfortable. He was born into a world where believing in Christ could get you killed, where bishops were martyred, where the simple act of gathering for worship could bring soldiers to your door. The historical records are sparse, as they are for most figures from this period, but tradition tells us that Nicholas was imprisoned during the Diocletian persecution. He survived, but he bore the scars of what he had witnessed. When he later struck Arius at the Council of Nicaea, he was not acting as some peaceful saint momentarily overcome by passion. He was acting as a man who had watched his brothers and sisters in faith tortured and killed for their beliefs. A man for whom heresy was not an abstract theological error, but a direct assault on the faith people had died for. This is the Nicholas the Christmas cards don't show. Not a jolly grandfather figure, a survivor, a fighter, a man forged in the fires of persecution who would not stand silent while someone threatened to undo everything the martyrs had died for. Nicholas's parents were wealthy Christians, devout and generous by all accounts. They raised their son in the faith, teaching him the virtues of charity and compassion. But they did not live to see him grow old. A plague swept through the region when Nicholas was still young. Both his parents died, leaving him an orphan, but an orphan with a substantial inheritance. He was rich, young, and alone. He could have done anything with that money. He could have lived a life of comfort and ease, insulated from the suffering around him by walls of gold. Instead, he gave it all away. The most famous story of Nicholas's generosity, the one that would eventually transform him into the gift-giving figure we know today, concerns 3 sisters in his hometown of Patara. Their father had once been a wealthy man, but he had fallen on hard times. Now he was destitute, unable to provide dowries for his daughters. In the ancient world, a woman without a dowry faced a grim future. No respectable man would marry her. She would become a burden on her family, a source of shame. And for families desperate enough, there was always another option, one that no father wanted to contemplate. The father, in his despair, was preparing to sell his daughters into prostitution. It was that, or watch them starve. Nicholas heard about the family's plight, but he did not want to give his charity openly, perhaps out of humility, perhaps to spare the father's pride. So, one night, he crept to the family's house and threw a bag of gold through an open window. It was enough for the eldest daughter's dowry. She was married and saved from her fate. He returned a second night, another bag of gold. The second daughter was saved. By the third night, the father was waiting. He had guessed that his mysterious benefactor would return. When Nicholas approached with the third bag of gold, the father caught him, fell at his feet in gratitude, and tried to thank him. Nicholas made the man promise to tell no one. He wanted no credit for his generosity. He wanted only to serve God. This story is the origin of gift-giving traditions associated with Saint Nicholas. The bags of gold, in some versions, landed in stockings hung by the fire to dry, hence the tradition of Christmas stockings. The secret nighttime delivery became the model for Santa's annual visits. But we should not sanitize this story. The father was about to sell his daughters into sexual slavery. They would have been raped repeatedly by strangers until their youth faded and they were discarded. This is what Nicholas prevented. Not a minor inconvenience, not a bit of hardship, but a lifetime of violation and degradation. Nicholas's generosity was not soft or sentimental. It was fierce. It was urgent. It was aimed at the darkest corners of human suffering, at the places where innocence is destroyed and hope dies. He did not give presents to children who had been nice all year. He saved girls from being sold as sex slaves. This is the real Saint Nicholas, and this is what we have forgotten. Nicholas became Bishop of Myra, a port city on the Mediterranean coast. He was known for his piety, his generosity, and increasingly for his miracles. Sailors prayed to him when storms threatened their ships, and calm waters would follow. Prisoners facing execution would cry out his name, and witnesses reported seeing Nicholas appear in distant cities to intervene on their behalf. The sick were healed, the dying were restored. The impossible became routine in his presence. Whether we believe these stories literally or understand them as the hagiographic exaggerations common to ancient saints' lives, they tell us something important about how Nicholas was perceived. He was not seen as a comfortable, friendly figure. He was seen as a man of power, divine power channeled through mortal flesh. He commanded storms. He defied emperors. He could be in two places at once. This is not Santa Claus. This is something closer to a superhero or a god. But one legend stands out above all others. One story that reveals the darkness at the heart of the Nicholas tradition. A darkness that has been almost completely erased from modern memory. It is the story of the 3 children and the butcher's barrel. The story exists in many versions, but they all share the same horrifying core. 3 young boys, sometimes described as students, sometimes as young clerks, sometimes simply as children, were traveling through the countryside. Night fell before they could reach their destination, and they stopped at an inn to seek shelter. The innkeeper welcomed them warmly, offered them food and drink, and showed them to their room. That night, while they slept, he murdered them. In some versions, he slit their throats. In others, he hacked them to pieces with an axe. The details vary, but the horror is consistent. 3 innocent children, trusting in the hospitality of a stranger, killed in their beds. But the innkeeper was not merely a murderer, he was also a butcher, and he had a practical use for the bodies. He dismembered the children. He packed their flesh into a large barrel, salted like pork, and he planned to sell them as meat to unsuspecting travelers. This is a story we tell about Santa Claus. This is part of the Saint Nicholas tradition. one of the most famous legends associated with him for over 1,000 years. Children pickled in a barrel, human flesh sold as food, cannibalism as commerce. 7 years passed. The butcher innkeeper continued his gruesome trade, and then St. Nicholas arrived. The bishop was traveling through the region, and he too stopped at the inn for the night. The innkeeper, not recognizing his guest, offered him the usual hospitality, including a meal. Nicholas looked at the meat set before him, and he knew. Divine insight. The power that allowed him to calm storms and save prisoners, now revealed to him the true nature of the flesh on his plate. He knew what it was. He knew where it came from. He knew what lay in the barrel in the cellar. He rose from the table. He descended to the cellar. He found the barrel still packed with the salted remains of children, and he performed his greatest miracle. He made the sign of the cross. He prayed, and the children rose from the barrel, whole, alive, restored from dismemberment and death, as if waking from sleep. 7 years dead, pickled in salt, sold as meat. And yet they stood before him, rubbing their eyes, complaining that their nap had been too short. "We slept so well," they said. This story was enormously popular throughout medieval Europe. The image of Nicholas standing over a barrel with 3 children emerging from it became one of the most recognizable icons of the saint. And yet, almost no one today has heard of it. Why would Christians create and cherish such a gruesome story? The answer lies in the medieval understanding of holiness and childhood. In that world, death was everywhere. Child mortality was staggeringly high. The story of the 3 children in the barrel spoke to that reality. It acknowledged the worst thing that could happen, the nightmare scenario, and then it offered hope. Even from that, especially from that, if God's power could reach into a butcher's barrel and pull back life, then it could reach into any grave. For most of his history, St. Nicholas did not travel alone. The jolly, solitary Santa Claus is a modern invention. For centuries, across Europe, Nicholas was accompanied by a dark figure, a punisher, a demon. The most famous of these companions is Krampus. Krampus comes from the Alpine regions of Austria and Bavaria. His name derives from the German word Krampen, meaning claw. He appears as a beast, half goat, half demon, with shaggy fur, cloven hooves, and a long, lolling tongue. He carries chains, symbolizing the binding of the devil by the church. He wields a bundle of birch branches for beating misbehaving children, and on his back he carries a sack for carrying away the truly wicked. On the night of December 5th, Krampus roams the streets. While Nicholas rewards good children, Krampus menaces the bad ones. This is Christmas as it was celebrated for centuries. Not a season of universal good cheer, but a time of judgment. A night when a saint and a demon walk together, sorting children into categories of blessed and damned. Across Europe, different regions develop their own versions. In France, there is Père Fouettard, Father Whipper. He is the butcher himself, condemned to serve Nicholas for eternity as penance. In the Netherlands, there is Zwarte Piet, Black Peter. In Germany, Knecht Ruprecht. The pattern repeats. Wherever Nicholas went, darkness followed. This was not an accident. It was the point. Without the threat of punishment, the promise of reward loses its meaning. Without shadow, there is no appreciation of light. The saint and the demon were 2 sides of the same coin, judgment rendered visible, walking together through the winter streets. The journey from Bishop Nicholas to Santa Claus is a story of cultural transmission and forgetting. In 1823, the poem A Visit from St. Nicholas appeared. the one that begins, "'Twas the night before Christmas." This poem did more than any other text to define the modern Santa. Gone is the mitre, gone is the staff, gone is the companion who punishes the wicked. Moore's Santa is all reward and no punishment. Then came Thomas Nast's cartoons, and finally, the Coca-Cola advertisements of the 1930s, the saint who slapped heretics, the bishop who rescued children from a butcher's barrel, the stern judge who traveled with demons. All of this was gone, replaced by a brand mascot designed to sell sugar water. Nicholas of Myra was a figure of moral seriousness. Santa Claus is a figure of unconditional acceptance. Nicholas offered hope in the face of genuine evil. Santa offers toys. The bones of Saint Nicholas still exist. They rest in the Basilica di San Nicola in Bari, Italy. The same bones that merchants stole from Myra nearly 1,000 years ago. Scientific analysis has confirmed they are consistent with a 4th century male who suffered from imprisonment. It is strange to think about. Somewhere in a crypt in Italy, the actual skeleton of Santa Claus lies in a marble tomb. The bones that walked into the Council of Nicaea, that struck Arius, that knelt in prayer before the butcher's barrel, they are still here. Every December, billions of people participate in rituals they do not fully understand. They hang stockings, a custom born from a saint's secret charity. They tell stories of a gift giver in the night. Santa Claus is Saint Nicholas with his memory erased, the shadow of a saint wearing the saint's robes, but emptied of the saint's substance. But perhaps the darkness is returning. Krampus is experiencing a revival. People are rediscovering the older traditions, perhaps because we know that a holiday without shadow is incomplete. That light means nothing without darkness to contrast it. Nicholas slapped a heretic. Nicholas saved children from a butcher. Nicholas stood against the darkness of his age. That is the saint we need, not the one we have made. Remember Nicholas of Myra. Remember the demons who walked with him. Remember that the night is long, but it is not forever. And remember this: every time you hang a stocking, every time you speak of a gift giver in the night, you are standing in the shadow of Saint Nicholas. What you do with that shadow is up to you. If this story moved you, if you believe these dark chapters deserve to be remembered, please subscribe. It is always a privilege to know who joins us in these explorations of the shadows. Until next time, this has been the Midnight Archives. Stay curious, stay skeptical, and never forget, the past is never truly past. It lives in the stories we tell, in the saints we forget, and in the demons we pretend don't exist.